Hey Shane, thanks for joining us. I'm excited to tell me about these tapes that you have. What is the background of what's on them?
Yeah, Sean. So thanks for having me on. It's an honor. I've always been a big fan of yours. But as far as the tapes, these go back. I mean, there's legend and history about these tapes supposedly being around, and basically what kept my granddad alive. I started hearing about them probably in the mid '80s, late '80s, when I was, early teens, something along those lines. And there was always some speculation in our head and doubt that, does he really have the tapes, or is he just saying that so that the folks behind the assassination, LBJ, don't go after him? But sure enough, in probably 2015-ish, about 10 years ago, these tapes surfaced, and me, my cousins, a few folks knew about them, and we've kept them in safekeeping. And they've actually kind of tried to release them a time or two, but everybody was afraid of them and um, speculative of them, skeptical. So finally, we've got them out as of about 2, 3 months ago, and now it's all over the place.
So what is it that's on them? We're going to play a little for the audience in a second, but I just give me a sense, like, what is it that we're hearing on these tapes, and who's in them, and what are they suggesting?
Well, Sol, it's been a pretty touch and go situation. Lyndon and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through it this far, and I guess we'll continue to do so. Lyndon should have never issued that order to Mike, but we've had our differences, and I'm a true blue to Lyndon, as I've always been, and tried to carry out every order that he'd ever given me. But this is one I'll probably never be able to forget.
All right, so you'll hear, a couple of voices, and it's just old West Texas dialect as far as how they're talking. One of them, the guy that starts out, is my granddad, Billie Sol Estes. And, most of the stuff you can look up if somebody wants to follow along with Sean's program and, do your own research, pull it up in Chat GPT, Grok, online. Billie Sol Estes, one of the biggest funders, donors to LBJ, and I think was tied in with kickbacks, pay for play with him. That's my granddad. And then Clifton Carter. He was LBJ's right-hand man, his bag man, going way back into the 40s. And then even after the assassination, was still tight with Kennedy. He is LBJ's right-hand man. You can look him up, Clifton C. Carter. And it's my granddad and Cliff Carter talking in the early 80s, which was this short time span of when my granddad had gotten out of prison and when before Cliff died, because Cliff died the same year. So it's within about a 5-6 month span that they would have recorded this. And this is just one that we've uncovered. There's supposed
What
to
are
be
they
more
saying? So, first of all, what was your grandfather in prison for?
His court case was the very first ever televised court case. The Kennedys sent down supposedly is over 50 FBI agents to investigate my granddad. They weren't necessarily going after my granddad. They were ultimately going after LBJ. And so if anybody's familiar with the political climate at the times, there was a big bit of turmoil between the Kennedys and the Johnson camp back in the early 60s. So they were ultimately trying to root him out. They knew that he was up to nefarious activity, and they were working on really potentially a PR campaign to get him off of the ticket with them. So they were going after his cronies, or the Texas Mafia, the Texas Syndicate, which was a bunch of wealthy Texas businessmen, oil men. You had the Hunt family, you had Brown and Root, you had attorneys, and my granddad was he was supposedly worth 400 to maybe 600 million in the 60s.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's real money, real money.
So what are they saying on this tape? The two of them are chatting, and what are they saying on these tapes? And also, are they intentionally recording themselves?
Yeah, so a gentleman sent me a bunch of information. I didn't know if Cliff Carter knew he was being recorded or not, but a gentleman sent me some stuff that was testimony from my granddad when he was trying to release this stuff in the mid 80s, but he couldn't get immunity. So he said that Cliff Carter was aware of the recordings that they had of him, LBJ, and the hitman before the assassination, and that Cliff was aware of this one, and they were both basically using them to protect their own lives, because after they started seeing this hitman and LBJ ordering murders and people to get killed, they were like, we probably better look out for ourselves.
Right. So on the tape, are they coordinating or discussing the assassination of JFK?
So they are openly discussing the assassination of JFK, to some degree what happened, who was behind it, who was involved. And I think it's a somewhat of a myopic view. I don't know that they're discussing everybody that was involved, but they're certainly pointing the finger at a couple of people.
Like
LBJ and the hitman Malcolm Wallace.
And who's Malcolm Wallace? Just a random dude that they hired to carry out an assassination, or does he have any connection to Kennedy or LBJ?
Deep ties to LBJ, and that goes back to some Texas history, to where he was apparently a brilliant guy, very intelligent. Was over, I believe, the student body at University of Texas, and then somehow or another, I've heard it was either a love triangle, as what supposedly happened with Josepha Johnson, which was LBJ's sister, and a golf pro, I believe, or tennis pro, Doug Kinzer. And Mac walked in, I think, into a country club and smoked him. I mean, he outright murdered Doug Kinzer. And that's public record. There was an open trial in Texas about it. And he was sentenced to 5 years, which seems very light. And then he never served any time. LBJ got him off of all of that. And he was LBJ's guy from then on out. The real story supposedly is the reason he killed him is he was dating Josepha, and he was trying to blackmail LBJ, and LBJ wasn't having it.
Has anyone from the government, in light of all this talk about the JFK files and since whenever you came into possession of them, has anyone ever come to you and said, can we hear them? Can we listen to them? Can we take possession of them?
No, it's been,
has anyone from Congress? I mean, like all these people who now are investigating this, no one's contacted you?
I am in touch with, I think it's Anna Paulina Luna.
Right. Yeah. I was going to ask, from Florida.
Yeah. I reached out to her executive assistant, or one of her staff members. I was connected with them. I don't know that I've heard back, but oddly, I mean, not a lot different than the Warren Commission, where, there were 22 police officers that heard gunfire from the grassy knoll. Those people aren't interviewed. And so I think there's still a real intent to suppress the truth. And in time, I trust that this will get further. And, folks like you putting their show out and putting this out there further just empowers the public to use their voice. And I encourage everybody who listens to this, does their own research, and comes to rational conclusions, reach out to your representatives and hammer them and tell them that y'all want the truth, that we're tired of the government suppressing it.
So Shane, you said that your grandfather was probably concerned about his well-being, because of the LBJ folks. Is there any sense that any of his kin are concerned about you putting the word out about what may or may not have happened?
Yeah, and there's one individual, I dearly love, that was frustrated with it, and just feels like the past needs to stay the past. They had to live it and be a part of it and experience it. Their phones were tapped for pretty much the duration of their life, as long as I think my granddad was alive. And, they had folks listening in on their conversations, and it was a tough time for them. So some folks that are closer to it, they want it to stay in the past, as to where, other, like the second generation, third generation down that have kind of lived under this, I think it's freeing to them to get this out and get this kind of weight off of our shoulders and our back, and potentially help to restore some honor there. Because obviously when folks are attacked in a political setting, they're going to assassinate their character and try and demolish them. And they did that same thing back in the 60s to my granddad. So it's mixed within the family.
So you mentioned Anna Paulina Luna. She's been chairing this effort to get all the files released. The president couple weeks ago, whatever it was, 10 days ago, released all of these files. Is it safe to say that you don't believe that that's an accurate full picture of what happened in terms of the Kennedy assassination?
There were a couple of interesting things that came out. I've heard that that's not the full release. It sounds like there's still a lot more documents. I've also heard that there was quite a bit that was being shredded and released. And so even prior to the release, some folks were asking me on various podcasts, what do you think we're going to find? And my opinion at the time was, I think it's probably 20% that we may find something that's revealing and has an abundance of new information, but 80% chance that we're not going to find anything new, because if they went through the lengths of setting up a fake commission in the Warren Commission, appointing LBJ's enemies to be the ones that are investigating his assassination, outright lying about several things that have already been caught and verified, and then killing a bunch of people. I've heard some of these experts that have researched this whole case, in the tape, my granddad talks about 17 killings just surrounding his court case. And some of these experts on the assassination have said that there's been upwards of 100 killings, murders, to keep this covered up. So you don't go around killing 100 people and creating fake commissions to leave a smoking gun sitting within boxes inside of an agency. I just don't see that happening. So I don't think we get the full picture. I think we have to use logic, deductive reasoning, and look into the surrounding circumstances and the testimony of people that were not interviewed, were not considered as part of the piece, even though they were there. And I mean, just even looking at the circumstantial components of Time Magazine had the Zipruder film for 13 years before they released it. And that's the one where it shows Kennedy's head popping back from a gunshot. And, you look at the experts on bullets and trajectory, start looking at all of that, and none of it makes sense. Right. So the way that makes sense is you start to look at this and then about 15 other pieces of information and then dig, and you can figure it out.
Right. Well, Shane, I appreciate you sharing your family's information with us. This is unbelievable Starly news. So thank you for being here. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.